Hi, I'm the Weird Christian, and today I'm going to talk about so many things. So hold on to your hats. This is going to be quick, and it's not going to be, I'm not going to try to prove everything or all this. I'm just presenting an idea for you to think about. Okay, and here is the basic summary of it, a few things. First, I'm going to talk about how there's a huge connection between early Jewish leaders around the 6th century and the 7th century who actually became the instigators of Islam. Okay, and it's nothing to do with the standard Islamic narrative. This is information that I've heard from a person named Mel, who has this site. It's Islamic Origins, and he does a lot of study in archaeology, early writings, coins, all sorts of things that they use for understanding Islamic narrative at that time in the Middle East. And some of his research has really come up with some amazing things to think about. Okay, now that's the first thing I'm going to be talking about, how Islamic narrative, or how Islam was actually possibly started up by a bunch of Jews in basically Mesopotamia area. Okay. Of course, that's completely different than what Islam teaches. I understand that. And I'm also going to be talking about, because I'm going to be talking about Joseph, this Messiah ben Joseph, I'm going to talk a little bit of the story of Joseph. And most people don't see this, but when I read Genesis, I see prophecy, huge prophecy for Israel from the time before even the Exodus of Israel from Egypt to, well, as we can see, times after 600 AD, the development of Islam. So, and there's more, there's way more, but I will only handle that for now because it's huge. But if you want to find out more about some of the ideas that I presented about the prophecy in the book of Genesis for that timeline that I'm talking about, like with Israel from before it even went into Egypt to long after, and even in the times of development of Islam and beyond that. Okay, it's like amazing. But I'm not going to talk about all that here. All I'm going to talk about is a little bit of the story of Joseph and how he relates to some of the, how he relates very close to the suffering servant, and how he relates very close to the life of Jesus. So I will be presenting that. And then I'll just present at the end how it's very interesting that in Matthew's account, which is, from what I gather, is supposed to be Joseph's genealogy. Of course, it's not a full genealogy. It's, they say from 14 generations from Abraham to going into, I think going into Egypt, possibly. And then 14 generations, how does it go? And then 14 generations to David, or maybe it's 14 generations from Abraham to David, and then 14 generations from David There's 3 of them. So one I think is 14 generations from David to Jesus. So the other one must be from 14 generations. I have to look at it again because I don't have it that memorized. So, but the one for Jesus, his father was Joseph, okay, in Matthew, and Joseph's father was Jacob, which I find fascinating because for the sons of Israel, Jacob was the father of Joseph, who went into Egypt. And so there seems to be a lot of interesting parallels. Okay, so that's just kind of a quick rundown on what I'm going to be talking about. I don't know if you think, well, that's crazy. I'll find out how crazy it is. Okay, so first I talked about Mal, and this is his site here. And he's in this video, he's talking about Messiah ben Joseph. Now, in the Jewish culture, and they have a Messiah ben Joseph who in the Bible, it has a suffering servant, and that's who Messiah ben Joseph they relate to. And then they have a Messiah ben David. So they have 2 Messiahs. The Messiah ben David is the one who goes and conquers. Okay, and that's what goes on there. So they don't like to talk about the Messiah ben Joseph because when you start talking about him, he has too many. It just matches up with Jesus too much, so they don't talk about him much. They'll talk about the Messiah ben David because Jesus hasn't come back again. So they can say, well, Jesus isn't the guy because he hasn't conquered the world in that sense. So it's interesting to know that Jews have these 2 messiahs. Okay, we'll just continue on here. And here's a book by David C. Mitchell, and it's called Messiah ben Joseph, and it talks all about, talks about some history in the time of the 7th and 6th century and what Jews were doing and what was going on at that time, which is very fascinating. And if you listen to Mel's his videos in Islamic origins, anyway, you can get a lot of detail about that, and he's still working on this stuff. So you'll learn so much about the history of Islam and even the history of the church at that time, Christian church and other things. So it's quite interesting. So here we have Messiah ben Joseph, and they say in this book from Jewish writings of the time, they say that Messiah ben Joseph will appear, and his name is Nehemiah ben Hushiel. I think Hushiel. Anyway, and which is a fellow that lived in around 600 A.D. And with him, the tribe of Ephraim, Manasseh and Benjamin, and some of the sons of Gad. Okay, so these, like the Nehemiah ben Hushiel, he was a fellow up in Mesopotamia and decided to conquer, from what I'm gathering, Jerusalem. And he got the Persian army and Arabs to come down and take Jerusalem from the Byzantine Empire, basically, or the Roman Empire. And they won. But this fellow, Nehemiah ben Hushiel, he died in the process, apparently. Okay, so and then they say, after Nehemiah ben Hushiel, a man of Ephraim ben Joseph, will appear 40 years, who is the man of ben Joseph, who will appear 40 years before Messiah ben David comes, whose name is Menahem ben Amiel. So this other character who lived in the 7th century, he came like after, and he reconquered from the losses that from this other fellow. The first guy died, and so they considered that he suffered. And the second guy comes conquering, which is the Messiah ben David. This is what was happening for the Jewish theology and thoughts at that time of 600 AD. Okay, and this is what that book is about. I haven't read the book yet, but it sounds like it's super fascinating. And listening to Mel about it is really interesting. So, and here is, here again it talks about 40 years before Messiah ben David comes, whose name is Menahai ben Amiel, will come Menahiah ben Hushio, a man of Ephraim ben Joseph, and he will stand forth in Jerusalem and cause all Israel to gather to him there. So that's what the first Messiah did. The Messiah ben Joseph did. Okay. And, okay. Anyway, and he is destined to fight the war of the Lord with the Messiah of the Lord and the brazen-faced king Armilus ben Eben, who came out of the stone. Now, we know that there's a stone that the Muslims, at the Kaaba, where they run around, or they don't run around, but they walk around the stone and they do that kind of stuff. Well, here is an allusion to this stone, I think, which it could be or could not. These are ideas just to think. I just found it fascinating just to consider all this. Eben is a Hebrew name that means stone or rock. It is derived from the word Eben Ezer, which is referenced in the Old Testament as a monument of remembrance erected by Samuel on the battlefield for the Hebrews after they defeated the Philistines. So here is this stone, and Eben Ezer. It is interesting in this sense, because when I've done a talk on the Christmas Carol, and there's Ebenezer, and if you actually understand the story, and a bit about Gnosticism, that story, the Christmas Carol, is full of Gnostic theology. Like, it's just packed. Okay, I've talked about it a little bit, but I'm not going to talk about Gnosticism, what it is, and how it's related to this. But these little connections are just very fascinating. I'm just kind of throwing it out there. I'm not going to make the connections for you at this point. But, okay. And he took me, I guess he's having some kind of vision, and showed me a stone in the shape of a woman. And he said to me, Satan will lie with this stone, and it will become pregnant, and Armilus Hercules will come out of it, and he will rule over the world, and no one will stand before him, and all who do not believe him will die by his heavy sword. So the stone bore a child, according to this theology that they're presenting in these Jewish writings in the 6th and 7th century about some prophecies. But you can see that there's a lot of connections, it seems to be, to me, with the stone and then the birth of Islam, which is quite interesting. I have to read it, the book and everything, and just meditate on it. But I just thought I'd throw this out on everybody. Now, okay, so that was all I wanted to talk about in how, look at that book, Messiah ben Joseph by Michelle or David Michael. Let's see what, anyway, and and I'm going to maybe buy that book myself and read it. It sounds very fascinating. And Mel was doing it. You can listen to Mel, very fascinating fellow, lots of different interesting conversations he has with different people. So we're not talking about anything as, this is the way it is. And no, I'm just presenting ideas for people to understand, to try to fit the puzzles together and make pieces fit. This is what I do all the time, and I think you might like to do this too. So I'm just telling you, go to these resources, go to Mel's channel, Islamic Origins, and maybe buy this book or get this book of some way and do a read. I'm going to be doing it myself, and it's going to be fascinating, I think. So that's that part of the talk I was going to do. Now, here I'm just going to talk about how this Jewish symbolism and this theology that they made up, how it has that originated in Mesopotamia, how it has been attacking Christianity and trying to stop people from understanding the Bible and just attacking just actual wars. And I just wanted to present that this is what happened in the Bible, kind of told about these two, one in Egypt, one in Babylon, how these group would try to stop people of God from knowing about the kingdom and being in the kingdom, fighting with them. So I'm going to talk about now about the story of Lot, which is in my prophecy stories, an interpretation of what's going on in Genesis. Lot is a representation of Israel in this world, in history. And Abraham is more of the prophets of Israel in history. So you got Lot being a nation of Israel, and Abraham being more like Judah and prophets of Israel. So in the Bible, there was Sodom and Gomorrah, and that was a time when, there was, I can't remember exactly what chapter it is in the Genesis, but it has a story of Sodom and Gomorrah there. And after that Sodom and Gomorrah story, Lot ran off with his wife, who died, which is interesting. And so basically a woman is considered a church. So the church of Israel basically died because it tried to stay back in that time. And then Lot was seduced by got drunk and seduced by his two daughters, and they formed two nations, the Ammonites and the Amorites, I think. Anyway, both those nations were involved with fighting Israel when it was trying to get to the promised land during the Exodus and after the Exodus even. So these two children, they grew up in the nations that actually fought to try to keep the children of Israel out of the promised land. That's the story I want to get. So, and I'm saying that these two children, these two nations represent the Jews after the fall. Okay, here's another thing I'm going to give you. The judgment on Sodom and Gomorrah, where they got destroyed, was in my prophecy chronological showing what's going on in the book of Genesis. It actually represents the destruction of Jerusalem by the Roman armies in 70 AD. I know. Okay, just go with it. I realize that I'm not showing any of the connections or the story up to this or any the chronological order of it. I present more in another video about the prophecies in Genesis. And it's a video I have under my playlist Christianity. So if you can look for it. Maybe I'll put in a link in the comment section so that you can just pop into it and have a look at it if you want. So you can understand what I'm saying, that Sodom and Gomorrah represented Jerusalem. Okay, you've never heard this before, I understand. It's totally new, I understand. But just go with it, please. So here we have, and I don't think it was anything like this kind of situation here. I mean, they got the wine, but he's supposed to be basically probably laying in his bed kind of drunk, and then these girls sneak in one at a time, sneak in and pretend that they're his wife. And so he doesn't really know what's going on. He's kind of in a drunken stupor. And anyway, that's the story that they say in Genesis. It's nothing like what this picture presents, though this is supposed to be a representation of the story. Okay, anyway. So I just wanted to present that. But, okay, so that is that section where basically I'm saying that these Jews that have this Messiah ben Joseph, Messiah ben David theology, and they make a bunch of prophecies from the Bible, and they put it right into their 600 AD area, so that they can say that this is what's going on then. Okay, and people do that all the time. They did it in 600 AD, but my story is that these people that did that were basically being like the Ammonites and Amorites, or sorry if I'm making them, but those two children, they're doing what those two children are doing, stopping people from knowing about the promise and the kingdom of Christ. So that's just a connection there. Think about it, meditate about it, try to understand what I'm saying. I don't think you'll catch what I'm saying, because it's thrown out there and just thrown at you, and it's totally different than anybody says. So when you're something so completely new, anyway, look at my prophecy thing. You might give you some story. It'll take a while to kind of put it together, and I'm not really presenting it in an easy fashion. I understand. Okay, so now I'm going to switch gears again. Okay, just like I said, I'm doing kind of three things in this. What is the story of Joseph? Okay, well, we all know that Joseph had some dreams. If you read Genesis, he had some dreams, and his brothers hated him because it was basically saying that he was going to lord it over them all, and he didn't, and he was being the favorite, and they didn't like him. And so he went out, his dad, Jacob, went and sent him out to see his brothers, and they stripped him down and took his clothes and threw him in a pit, a water pit. It was empty, and they don't tell how long he was in that pit, but he was in there for a while. I suspect that he was in there for like 3 days and 3 nights. But, it's just because he's being basically in this pit thing, he's going to death. Like, I'm sure that he thought he was going to die, and they wanted to kill him. So the whole thing is that his brothers were going to kill him. Just like Jesus, he considered that when he came, that those who were Israel were his brothers, and they wanted to kill him because they didn't like him. So, same kind of story. So that's it's a similarities in the story. So this is Joseph being the crucified, basically crucified, thrown in the pit of death, and then he was taken out, like a resurrection, and his brothers didn't really know where he was. Some somehow, some of them, maybe one of them. It's very unclear. It's like they kind of didn't know, but though they sold him to some traders that were going down to Egypt. But it's kind of like they didn't really know that he disappeared. Like, it's similar to the idea of going up to heaven. It's just an interesting analogy. And then if you want to, I'm just throwing analogies at you like crazy. I'm not trying to prove them. I'm just throwing ideas at you. Then he lived with Potiphar as a servant. And he was a head servant there, doing well. And he wasn't treated that bad. And if we want to take his life as, okay, he's got the Christ thing happening, and he's taken up. And now he, as a servant, he's trying to help this Potiphar's servants and organize his household. It's kind of, but he's still not giving a chance to actually have his own kingdom, basically. So he's still, and if you look at the history of the church and how we're praying to God, and I mean, Jesus is answering prayers, but we still really don't have mastery. We don't have our own kingdom. We're not in God's kingdom. We're still working under slavery, even though we ask, Jesus to help us and all that. And those who are under Joseph in Potiphar's house were in the same way. But it was still not too bad. He was having a life and a lot of, a purposeful life, and it was not too bad. But then another church, or Potiphar's wife, which represented in over here. This is supposed to be Potiphar's wife, like in Joseph. This is supposed to be Joseph, and then thinking, I want that guy. So, and so, it's basically the kingdoms of this world saying, hey, I want this guy for me. I want to control him. I want him to be my gigolo, that I can just do whatever I want with him. And so that's what's going on in his life there. And so things don't go very good. And he gets thrown in prison because she says that he was, she basically defrauds him and slanders him. Now this, which is the same thing that happened through the church. They were slandered, and especially, in the first few centuries, they suffered a lot of persecution because they were slandered and treated badly by, the church of the kingdoms of this world. And then he goes into much more severe prison, but he's there being, because he's still being the servant. Like Christ is the servant, actually, when we ask him for prayers, and he's doing all sorts of stuff, even though it's not really his kingdom coming here yet, but he's still helping us. So he's helping all the slaves in prison. We are the slaves in prison. So he's helping them all have a better life, and he's doing things, but he's still not having his own kingdom. He's still basically in prison himself, in a sense, because he doesn't have his own kingdom yet. I mean, he's got his kingdom in heaven, but he doesn't have his kingdom on earth. So I'm just using the analogies. It's not, a lot of people will just, I'm not trying to say this is the way it is. I'm just presenting an idea to think about, to meditate on, think about. So here's the picture of Joseph here. They got Joseph here, and they got, the head jailer, and he's, or possibly, anyway, he's helping in this. And he's also, during that time, he gets some visions, or he interprets visions of people that are in that are thrown in prison too. For one is the taster, and the other one's the bread maker, and so they have the two interpretations by Joseph. And then even for that time, was a time still before he actually got out of prison, which is when he, this is another, supposed to be considered Joseph, but he was around 30 this time. Maybe he looks 30, I don't know. And here he's talking to the Pharaoh about the Pharaoh's dreams, because Pharaoh had some dreams about what was going to happen. He was really upset, didn't know what to do. And Joseph told him what his dreams meant. And then the Pharaoh said, hey, you seem to be smarter than all these guys. Maybe you should take charge. So he made him second in command. And so there is a very big analogy of, in a sense, of Jesus really taking the throne and actually being second in command of the kingdom. It's kind of a rough thing, and I'm not saying but it's the idea of a bit of church history and how it's going. And this is when he actually brings the kingdom of God onto earth, in a sense, in his life. It's a short chronological thing about Christ and the history of the church until his death. And during that time, his brothers go through a hard time, but then they come back and they all get to sup together, and they all reunite in the kingdom, and they have restoration. So it's kind of like, in this sense, it's not really the promised land, but they came into Egypt where they were given life, where if they lived out in Cana area, they were going to really suffer and die and starve to death. So they came into the promised land and were given life. It's not, okay, I'm just presenting ideas here. I don't want you to think that I'm trying to tell you how exactly it's interpreted. I just find that could be interpreted that way, and it gives a lot of sense to what's going on in Joseph's story, as being showing the life of Jesus going into the pit, being resurrected, and then also being the servant of all these people on earth right now, but it's not his kingdom. He's still working, solving problems for everybody, but it's not his kingdom on earth yet, until he is finally given the command of earth. And then at that time, his Jewish brethren come back to him, and they reunite, and he has his family again. So have a look at that. It's kind of interesting. I think that was kind of fascinating. I just wanted to share you that because I find it very fascinating. Okay, now I'm switching gears again. Okay, I know. This is kind of crazy. You don't have to listen to it all the time or whatever. You don't even have to listen to me at all. But it's just to give you something to think about and to think, wow, maybe I should really look at Genesis again, or I should look at what Mel's doing in his book of Origins. I'm just kind of trying to give you a little bit to be excited about studying the Bible again and to studying history. Okay, so here in Matthew is a genealogy of, and I've cut it down here, but it's a genealogy of Jesus and the son of David, the son of Abraham. Okay, so, and it says Abraham was the father of Isaac, and Isaac was the father of Jacob, and Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers, and Joseph was one of those brothers. And then I go ... because there's quite a few. Then Obed, the father of Jesse, and Jesse the father of David. And okay, so from Abraham to David, 14 generations. Okay, now we start again. David was the father of Solomon. Oh, now I remember how it went. Whose mother had been Uriah's wife, and Solomon the father of Rehoboam, and Ezekiel the father of Manasseh, and Manasseh the father of Amon, and I skipped a pile here. This is what this dot means. And then Ammon the father of Josiah, and Josiah the father of Zechariah and his brothers at the time of the exile to Babylon. Okay, so that's what it was from Abraham to David, from David to the exile, and then after the exile we have the exile to Jesus. And so we have Eleazar, the father of Mathan, and Mathan, the father of Jacob, okay, and Jacob, the father of Joseph. Just like back in the other day. I just thought that was kind of cool. And then you have Jesus, the Messiah. So it's the Messiah Jesus. Messiah ben Jesus. So it's very interesting. That's how it's done in Luke's or in Matthew's thing, and he has lots of names of all different people that you can read about in the Bible. You know, a lot of different people. So on Joseph's side, you can see all these names, lots of names that are really front and center in the Bible. And then for Luke, they do it differently, and it starts at Joseph and it works back, or it starts at Jesus and works back to right back to Adam. But if you look at the generations, it was according to the reduced, nice fitting 14, 14, 14 generations. In Matthew, the same period of time is like 40 generations in Luke. And they usually say that this is Mary's genealogy. It's not Joseph's genealogy. So there's two different genealogies going here. And I don't think either of them are probably complete, for sure. They're just names that are important that they put on there. Some are more complete than others. Sometimes they skip names. It's not really a problem in understanding or presenting the narrative. You know, a lot of people say, oh, it's not the same, blah, blah, blah. It's the end of the world. The Bible's no good. Try to understand what the Bible's trying to say. Don't put your expectations on it. Let it have its own expectations on it. That's what I'm saying. Anyway, so a lot of these names, like this Mathat, well, maybe that's the same guy as Mathan, maybe not. Of course, they're different people. So, yeah, it doesn't mention anything about Eleazar. So it's a kind of a different thing. But anyway, then it gets back to ... Like there's about 40 generations in this time between Joseph and David in this one. So there's lots of names there. And here we have the son of David, the son of Jesse. And then they do the son of Obed and the son of Boaz, who's another story in Ruth. And the son of Solomon and the son of, and so forth. And it gets right back to Noah. And then you have the 10 patriarchs, and you get right back to the son of Adam. And they also talk about Terah and Abraham. They go before, whereas the Matthew one just starts at Abraham goes that direction. This one goes from Abraham back, and so you get Terah and different generations. And I think that not every name is there that they should be, but it gives you an idea of how it follows. Okay. So, but I found it really fascinating in Matthew's account with Joseph's genealogy that Joseph's father was named Jacob. And then you have Joseph's son is the Joseph ben Messiah, which is kind of Ben is like the son. So Joseph's son is Messiah. It's kind of fun. Anyway, I just thought I'd throw that at you. And that's really what it was. It was kind of like a throw at you. And, but I don't know if you enjoyed it or got anything out of it. but I just wanted to present this just because I found it very fascinating. If you want to know more about I'll put a link to Mel's channel in the comments, and I'll also put a link to the chronological history prophecy in Genesis, and you can listen to that, and maybe you'll get something out of it. Anyway, God bless you. May God's peace be on you, and may God be showing you all sorts of new things in the Bible that just makes you excited about it. I pray in his name. Amen.